Good evening. It is Tuesday evening, June 17th, 2025. You're listening to Weather with Enthusiasm. This is your weather podcaster, weather enthusiast, Simcha Lefton. And we have something super inspirational for many of us summer weather enthusiasts. This is definitely the most inspirational part of the year. Totally phenomenal stuff as a heat dome overtakes much of this country. Before we even get to the heat dome overtaking this part of the country, we're going to speak briefly about Phoenix, Arizona, because something very special is happening in Phoenix later this week. We have a temperature in Phoenix, Arizona going up to 115 degrees Thursday or Friday. But the big thing over here is that in Death Valley, California, at Furnace Creek, the high is only forecasted to be 111 degrees. So that's a rarity. Temperatures are usually 10 degrees hotter at Death Valley than Phoenix. But in this case, we actually have hotter temperatures in Phoenix, Arizona. Okay, we're dealing with Fahrenheit over here. If you want to convert this into Celsius, 46 degrees Celsius in Phoenix, Arizona. We have temperatures going up to 44 degrees Celsius in the Death Valley, California area. Headed off into other places in the desert Southwest later this week. We also have intense heat, but that's not really where all the action is. The most inspirational city most years is St. Louis, Missouri, and I'll explain how that works. It's because St. Louis, Missouri is the furthest north city where you have an actual tropical air mass, a real tropical air mass that comes out of the Gulf of Mexico and comes and takes over the entire summer. There are summers that does that. It takes over the entire month of July. Hot and humid. You basically could feel like you're on the Gulf of Mexico. A city where the rest of the year one would have thought something like this would be impossible. A city where you have ups and downs throughout the entire year. They do have a winter. The temperatures drop to zero. Temperatures get very cold and windy. But all of a sudden comes the summer and it's just consistently hot and humid. There's an inspiration really everywhere in the country, but the inspiration is highest in St. Louis, Missouri. But for this week, we have the intense heat and humidity making its way into the Chicago, Illinois area on a level on par with St. Louis. Very intense stuff, and it's the consistency. The consistency is what makes the St. Louis so precious when it comes to summer heat, and that's what we're going to have going for us here in Chicago. It's not a one or two rinky-dink day heat wave. We're dealing with a solid 6 consecutive days with temperatures soaring well into the 90s across Chicago. What's the reason for this? Well, it's a 597 to 598 decimeter heat dome that sets itself up much further east than usual. A lot of times we have a heat dome situated over Texas or the desert Southwest that produces very intense heat that moves into the southern plains, and the heat dome expands much of the time, includes St. Louis. But Chicago can't get into the heat dome, at least not consistently, and Chicago tends to get the hot and humid weather ahead of these cold fronts, but then they quickly die out as the front moves through. But this heat dome is something very special, and many cities are going to feel it, cities that you won't even believe it. Detroit, Michigan, soaring well into the hundreds. New York City, parts of New York, temperatures going into the lower and mid hundreds. Washington, D.C. has forecast highs in the hundreds. We have a place in South Dakota, forecast highs approaching 110 degrees for 2 days in a row this week. The reason for that is because they have a real interesting situation happening there where all of the humidity gets dried out by afternoon. So you have humidity, dew points about 70 in the morning. All of that humidity disappears by the afternoon, and temperatures, therefore, all of that energy gets transferred from the humidity to the air temperature, and those temperatures just go zooming up. Okay, now, we spoke about a little bit, like a 60th of what actually is going on. It's actually much more intense because I just spoke about a couple cities. We didn't cover Minneapolis. We didn't cover the fact that dew points are going into the 70s up all the way into Canada. And by the way, there's also a heat wave developing in the Arctic, the southern portions of the Arctic in northern Canada. We did speak about this, or we were going to speak about this a week ago. I don't know if it was ever put on, but we do have heat developing over there. And then by the Caspian Sea, we have intensity developing over there. But here in this country, something which is totally remarkable that's going to be developing over the next several days is the humidity. This is something special, the extreme humidity. Not many people listening to this will say, nope, it's not special at all. It's humid every single summer. Well, no. If you don't know what we're talking about here. So, yeah, it's humid every summer. Dew points go into the mid and upper 60s every summer. Dew points go up to 70 every summer. Gulf Coast level dew points of 70 degrees. The most intense dew points, you have 1994. You have dew points going into the mid-70s in St. Louis. Several days in June, dew points in the mid-70s is very common in the summer. Each and every summer you get dew points in the mid-70s. But you have something that's not so common. First of all, in Chicago, it's not as common to get dew points in the mid-70s, especially not on a consistent basis. But the other thing is that Persian Gulf level humidities, Persian Gulf, meaning dew points in the low 80s, is something that does not occur in the United States except for rare circumstances, or recently it's been happening around Corpus Christi, Texas. Sometimes it happens around Galveston, Texas. But even Houston, Texas, dew points mid-70s, Galveston, Texas, upper 70s, sometimes a dew point of 80 degrees. Florida dew points remain in the 70s. But this upcoming week, and next, especially this upcoming Shabbos, 6 p.m., 6 to 7 p.m., that's when all of a sudden, you look at the European computer model, the dew points go bonkers almost everywhere. Going from the Midwest, it's just going to be absolutely miserable. It's going to feel, to the people who love it, it's going to be like Olam Haba, but to the other people, they're not going to like it. It's super healthy. If you love sweating, dew points, anyone who grew up in summers like this will absolutely love it here in Chicago by Shabbos, as temperatures soar into the 90s, and especially by Shabbos evening, Saturday evening, as those dew points go into the upper 70s, mid and upper 70s. But in Tennessee, we have some areas where dew points are going into the low 80s, Persian Gulf levels. That's stuff that occurs on the Persian Gulf. Washington Post tells us they tell us a reason that almost makes sense. It almost makes sense because there's a marine heat wave developing off in the mid-Atlantic waters and the Gulf of Mexico. And the Midwest Corn Belt is. So Dory wants to know why it's almost because we've been having a marine heat wave for years already, and we've been dealing with higher dew points. But in Tennessee, if you look at the Gulf Coast humidity, you'll see the dew points are not in the 80s on the Gulf Coast. The dew points don't go into the low 80s until Tennessee, 1,000 miles north of the Gulf Coast. So big kashas on blaming it on the marine heat wave. Nonetheless, the general thinking could very well be true. I mean, it certainly it's a support to say the higher water temperatures could be producing hot weather, but you don't have to say that. We've come from the summers here in the U.S., the Midwest, the East Coast. We've had so many miserably hot summers. 1901, who could even fathom that there would come a day when it would ever be hotter than 1901, 1921, 1934, 35, then the ultimate, 1936. Who would ever fathom we would have a year hotter than that in 2012? I have a whole different podcast dedicated just to 1936. 1954 hit 115 in St. Louis. 1936 was 111. But the thing is, the number of days over 90, the number of days over 100 in 1936 was a lot. I think 18 days in St. Louis, Missouri. So, and 2012 was an extremely hot year, extremely hot July. But we'll talk about it some other time. Well, Chicago, basically, the St. Louis heat came to Chicago in the year 2012, and St. Louis was just extremely hot. It was in the hundreds. It was like a taste of the Dust Bowl years in 2012. Very hot in Chicago, 2012. All right, so this upcoming summer, it was in the hundreds. Mostly 90s, but a couple of them. The average high was 90. The average low was 70. So this upcoming summer, long-term forecasters do tell us that we could expect above normal temperatures with above normal humidity headed into the summer. The first taste of that was in Chicago today, with temperatures went into the low 90s here in Chicago. We have temperatures supposed to sizzle into the mid-90s this upcoming Shabbos for both Chicago and St. Louis. Temperatures the European computer model shows temperatures going into the upper 90s in Chicago next week with high humidity, heat index reaching 105 for Chicago next week. That's from the European computer model, and that's the most accurate model that we have. And due to the fact that the marine heat wave is the fuel behind this, therefore, there's no reason to believe this is going to come to an end anytime soon, especially not for a city like St. Louis. Chicago, of course, will have those Lake Michigan interferences every now and then, as we might get at the end of next week. But 6 consecutive days with temperatures well into the 90s here. 2 other heat waves, at least, develop in the world. One by the Caspian Sea, brutal heat develops there, temperatures in the hundreds, and one in the southern portions of the Arctic Circle, as temperatures go from the mid-80s to the low 90s. That part does have to be updated. Another thing to mention, this is probably the most important thing possible, is that tomorrow we do have a chance for isolated tornadoes here in the Chicago area. Large hail, damaging wind gusts, thunderstorms, and a few isolated brief tornadoes possible in the Chicago area for tomorrow. And here's why. You see, whenever you have these hot and humid air masses, there's something called around the air mass, around the heat dome, there's something called what meteorologists refer to as the ring of fire. Continuous lightning that happens around the heat dome. That's the fire. The fire either is referring to the fact that it's hot in the dome, but lightning also is fire. So either way, you have a ring of fire right outside the heat dome. There's an enormous contrast of temperatures between the heat and the non-heat. In this case, it's not just the heat. Dew point is also a form of energy. Tremendous energy versus not much energy. That's where the contrast is. So you have 90s versus 70s. That's where the storms develop, right around there. That's where we will be tomorrow here in the Chicago area. Warm and humid tomorrow with temperatures around 80 degrees. Thunderstorms are always very difficult to predict. But anything that does develop, there's a good chance for it to become intense, possibly even severe. And some forecasters do tell us the possibility for brief tornadoes in some areas of the Chicago area. This heat returns to our region on Shabbos, and it returns at full intensity on a higher level. It's on a higher level than it was today in all aspects. The temperatures are higher, and the humidity is significantly higher, and the temperatures get even hotter for next week. According to the European computer model, temperatures actually reach a peak almost here in the Chicago area, even hotter than in St. Louis. Detroit, Michigan could easily surpass 100 degrees, along with many cities on the East Coast. I will point out that Philadelphia is another city where the dew points are expected to go higher than 75 degrees. Very intense stuff. So there's always more to speak about regarding this, especially if you read through a forecast discussion of the National Weather Service. But people want to stay safe, go to the National Weather Service website, read about all of the heat safety. We're just going to end off. This weather podcast is being put on the platform of 24/6. The platform is catered towards From Yidden. So we want to end off with a segment that also is going to be catered towards that crowd. So the way we do that is we're going to put some Torah, we're going to infuse some Torah into the weather right now. And first of all, we started off with something, but we're told, Chazal tell us that the Ruchnius is always an exact reflection of the Gashmius. Just the opposite. The Gashmius is an exact reflection of the Ruchnius. If you want to understand how the spiritual world works, all you have to do is you have to look at the Gashmius, and you can get tremendous inspiration. And there's certain places that if you were to look at them in the winter, if you were to look at these places, you would say, this place will never ever be what you think it's going to be in the summer. You show the person, go to Siberia, show the person pictures of what Siberia looks like in the summer. The person, show it to him when he's in the winter and say, listen, you're totally nuts. Someone painted that picture. It will never, ever be like that over here. There's never going to be trees. There's never going to be flowers on the trees. The sun's never going to rise. This place is just night. It's dead. It's bitter cold. Your spit freezes before it touches the ground. That's Siberia. If you were to go to St. Louis and you were to take a picture of Miami, how it's just 90 every single day in high humidity, St. Louis in the winter, it's never like that. You'll say, listen, that's very nice, a very nice, beautiful picture, but you're better off staying in Miami because it's never going to be like that here in St. Louis. Because we're always going up and down, up and down, up and down. Yeah, we have a hot day here, then it goes down again. But who would believe that there's going to come a time where all of a sudden it turns into Miami? It's even a higher level. It's just consistently like that. All of a sudden, there's almost no reason for even a weather forecast. There are summers where the heat wave is so intense. Summer of 1988, so consistent. The heat dome is so stationary. It's like almost not even necessary for a meteorologist to be there. There's movies, comedy movies, the meteorologists who left town, they left the recording on. Eventually, they were caught. But so we have to know that the same thing happens in our ruchnius, in our spiritual growth. As much as we might think something is impossible for us, this will never happen. It's so not me. How could this ever happen? It's so not me. That's him. That's them. It's so not St. Louis. It's Miami. This is so not Siberia. This is the pictures you're showing me. Those are pictures of San Diego, California, not Siberia. But yet, no, a few months later, under the right conditions, the same place, all of a sudden, San Diego comes to Siberia. And that's the same thing that we have to know in our ruchnius as well. And part of that is the inspiration. Part of this is what makes the weather so inspirational. But a part of it, to tell you the truth, a lot of it can't even be put into words at this time. Because I can just tell you, I could feel it in my heart, but cannot tell you why. Cannot tell you why these things, especially when the Bermuda high, really high temperatures, the consistent heat and humidity takes over a place like St. Louis, a place which has been total chaos the rest of the year. What the inspiration is behind that. But Chicago in certain ways like that, but it's not. I know, but it's not a Chicago. I can explain to you. To most people, Chicago might be like that too, but to me, it's not. Chicago doesn't do it. But to most people, it does. So we'll also end off that it's only with the help of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that we stay safe and that we have fun in all of this weather. Realize before the invention of the heat advisory, everybody went out and they played ball and they had fun. And with HaKadosh Baruch Hu's help, everyone will be safe tomorrow. Should take the necessary precautions to have a weather radio, if that's the way you get your warnings about tornadoes. And it's all the chaste Hashem. Take advantage of all the wonderful things that the hot weather has to offer, including sweating, very healthy for people. And I'm sure there's so many things that I don't even know about. Thank you for listening. I wish everybody a wonderful week and have a wonderful summer and a wonderful Shabbos later in the week. Stay safe. Stay good.